Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads where one night could change everything? Join Barbara and Amanda as they navigate the thrilling yet treacherous waters of temptation, secrets, and the choices that can shatter lives. What happens when the past collides with the present and the price of freedom comes with a heavy cost? Stick around to uncover their gripping stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating tales. As I lingered in the subdued glow of our living space, the resonance of the club's tunes still pulsating in my mind, I sensed Tom's grasp softly pressing mine. The evening had been a tempest of reminiscence and illicit longing, a waltz that guided us into the obscurity of deceit, with Richard, oblivious, immersed in his realm of mirth and libations. Tom and I had traversed a boundary that could never be retraced. Now, as the dawn's glow started to filter through the drapes, I pondered, could we ever revert to our former selves? Or had we just initiated a sequence of happenings that would dismantle the essence of our existence? I've perpetually discovered something enchanting about the manner in which a solitary instant can redirect the trajectory of one's life. As I positioned myself before the looking glass, fine-tuning the bands of a garment that hadn't been exposed to daylight for ages, I sensed that enchantment stirring. It was an attire that murmured of adolescence, of evenings brimming with chuckles, and the sort of liberty that arises from ignorance of the future. I am Barbara, and at 57, life had conformed to a snug, albeit somewhat foreseeable, pattern with my spouse, Richard. Richard, with his contagious laughter that could inundate a chamber, had been my companion for over 3 decades. His closest confidant, Tom, was the embodiment of allure, perpetually the soul of any gathering, with a magnetism that could make anyone feel extraordinary. One evening, as we lounged in our living space, the telephone jingled. It was Tom, his tone brimming with exhilaration. "Let's venture to Club Nostalgia," he proposed. "Revisit our youthful days." The notion was exhilarating, an opportunity to regress, to twirl, imbibe, and disregard the burden of time. Richard, ever the zealot, concurred instantaneously, his gaze illuminating with the prospect of escapade. And I, with a blend of eagerness and unease, not far behind as I selected my ensemble, couldn't help but experience a flutter of anticipation. The garment was a remnant from a bygone era, one where nocturnal excursions were about more than mere supper and cinema. It was about the exhilaration of the enigmatic, the potential of an evening that could culminate in myriad ways, some of which were unsuitable for genteel society. The anticipation was tangible as we readied ourselves, Richard, with his arm encircling my waist. I sensed the fervor of the instant intensify, the club's ambiance, dense with nostalgia, and the fragrance of vintage perfume seemed to envelop us. The melody, an unyielding rhythm from our past, drowned out the world beyond our petite circle of illumination. I cast a glance towards where Richard had last been observed, but he was still out of view, likely still beneath the bar counter, lost to the world in his inebriated slumber. Tom's voice, low and velvety, pierced through the clamor. You appear stunning tonight, Barbara, as if we've reversed time. His compliment, so genuine and unforeseen, sent a quiver down my spine. I pivoted to confront him, our gazes interlocking in an instant that felt electrified. His stare was penetrating, probing, as if questing for something he'd misplaced long ago. Tom, I commenced, my voice scarcely surpassing the melody. This evening, it's evoking so many recollections. He nodded, his palm gently compressing my waist. It's not merely the memories, Barbara. It's you. You've always possessed this spark. The atmosphere between us crackled with unvoiced potentials. His nearness was intoxicating, his contact dispatching waves of warmth through me. I was aware I should retreat, remind myself of Richard, but the enticement of the past, of what could have transpired, was too potent. Tom inclined closer, his breath tepid against my oracle. Let's dance, just like the old days. No one needs to be aware. The proposition was both thrilling and petrifying. Here was Tom, proffering a dance that could guide to realms I wasn't certain I wished to explore. Yet the allure was present, with Richard absent from the scenario, the ambiance transformed. Tom's contact was tender, his grin inviting. He requested another libation for me, his digits grazing mine as he proffered it. The melody seemed to decelerate, or perhaps it was merely my heartbeat that did. His lips discovered my neck, a kiss that was both unanticipated and electrifying. In that instant, something within me fractured, a yearning long interred beneath years of monotony. Without utterance, we advanced towards the restroom, the world exterior fading into obscurity. Within, the atmosphere was dense with the aroma of perfume and the faint reverberation of the club's melody. What transpired next was a tempest of ardor, a treachery that felt both erroneous and correct. We returned to the bar, our clandestine burden heavy between us. But the night was far from concluded. The club's illumination seemed to throb with our mutual secret, each gleam illuminating the culpability and exhilaration that pirouetted in my gaze. Tom's palm discovered mine beneath the table, a tacit accord to preserve this instant solely between us. We remained there, savoring our beverages, the flavor now imbued with the thrill of our actions. As the night progressed, the club commenced to vacate, the throng dispersing, leaving behind the vestiges of laughter and the echo of tunes from our youth. Richard still absent, likely still beneath the bar counter, oblivious to the tempest that had just traversed his life. Tom inclined nearer, his voice a murmur against the now subdued melody. Barbara, what do we do now? I observed him, the gravity of our deeds settling in. We revert to our lives, Tom, but tonight was ours. He nodded, comprehending the unvoiced vow of silence. We arose, preparing to depart, but not before one final dance. The melody, now a sluggish, spectral harmony, enveloped us as we swayed together, a concluding embrace in the shadows of the club. As we ventured exterior, the frigid nocturnal breeze struck us, a stark contrast to the warmth within. The stroll to the vehicle was silent, each stride a reminder of the boundary we'd traversed. When we ultimately located Richard, he was still back at the bar. We discovered Richard still blissfully unaware beneath the counter. Tom and I exchanged a glance, a tacit accord to preserve our secret. We awakened Richard, who muttered apologies for his condition and collectively decided it was time to return home. The journey was silent, with Richard dozing softly in the back while Tom and I sat up front, the tension evident. Upon arriving home, Richard staggered to bed, falling into a deep slumber. Tom remained, his presence now a blend of solace and allure. The house was quiet, save for the refrigerator's gentle hum. I stood at the doorway, observing Richard's tranquil rest, his chest moving rhythmically, signifying innocence and trust. Tom's hand took mine, gently guiding me away from the entrance. We relocated to the living room, where shadows danced on the walls, casting a faint, almost mysterious glow. Tom's voice was hushed. "Barbara, tonight felt like we were young again, didn't it?" I agreed, the significance of our actions weighing heavily on me. "Yes, but it was more than mere nostalgia, Tom. It was profound." He moved closer, his gaze seeking something in mine, perhaps absolution or comprehension. "I understand, and I'm not sorry for my feelings, but I regret the complications it introduces." The atmosphere was thick with the scent of our mutual guilt and the lingering fragrance of the club's perfume on our attire. I felt drawn to his presence, the warmth of his breath as he leaned in, his lips grazing my cheek in a gesture both tender and illicit. "We can't allow this to happen again," I whispered, my voice quivering with inner conflict. "Richard doesn't deserve this." Tom's grip on my hand tightened, a silent acknowledgement of the truth. "No, Barbara, but tonight, it was genuine. It was us, unguarded, free from the burdens of time." I withdrew slightly, the reality of our situation setting in. "But at what expense, Tom? We've crossed a boundary tonight, one we can't undo." He nodded in the dim light of our living room. Tom's hand found mine again, pulling me close. The kiss this time was different, filled with understanding, a shared secret binding us. We moved silently to the guest room, the thrill of the forbidden propelling our actions. It was another betrayal, one that felt even more intense with Richard sleeping nearby. Afterwards, Tom departed with a quiet farewell, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of what had occurred. I lay in bed beside Richard, guilt and adrenaline blending into a potent mix of emotions. The morning light was harsh, unrelenting as it filtered through the curtains. I could hear Richard's steady breathing beside me, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. The reality of my actions with Tom, not once but twice, began to sink in. The excitement of the previous night now felt like a heavy chain around my heart. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Richard, and went to the kitchen. The house was silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock, each tick a reminder of the time that had passed since our indiscretions. I made coffee, the routine action grounding me, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the moments with Tom, the touch, the kiss, the forbidden dance in the shadows. As I sipped my coffee, I pondered how to reconcile my actions with my life. My love for Richard was undeniable, a deep-rooted connection spanning decades. Yet there was Tom, stirring feelings I thought were long buried, feelings that were now complicating everything. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Tom, his presence unexpected, yet not surprising. His eyes met mine, a silent question hanging between us. "We need to talk," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of our shared secret. We sat in the living room, the same place where our betrayal began the night before. "It was a mistake," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. "We can't let it happen again." Tom nodded, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I know, Barbara, but it felt real, didn't it?" Morning came with the usual sounds of Richard preparing breakfast, oblivious to the storm that had passed through our home. I joined him, the routine of setting the table, the smell of coffee, all so normal yet so different now. As we sat down to eat, I looked at Richard, his face lined with the years we'd shared, and felt a pang of remorse mixed with a strange sense of liberation. The eggs were scrambled just the way I liked them, but every bite felt like a betrayal. Richard, with his gentle smile, asked if I had fun last night. I nodded, my heart heavy. Yes, it was quite the adventure, my voice steady, but inside my emotions were a whirlwind. Tom's call came later, his voice casual, asking if we had fun last night. I replied with a simple, "Yes, it was quite the adventure," my voice steady, my heart racing. Life continued, but something had shifted. The secret of that night was ours, a silent agreement between Tom and me, a memory that would linger unspoken in our future gatherings. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a web of my own making. Every time Tom and Richard were together, I felt the weight of our hidden truth. Their laughter, their shared stories, it all felt like a facade, a mask over the truth that only Tom and I knew. I watched Richard, his trust in me unwavering, his love as constant as the sunrise. Yet every time he looked at me with those trusting eyes, I felt a surge of guilt. The love I had for him was real, deep, and enduring, but now it was tainted with the knowledge of what had happened. Tom, on the other hand, seemed to carry the secret with a lightness that I envied. At our next gathering, his eyes met mine across the room, a fleeting acknowledgement of our shared secret. It was a look that said, "We're in this together," but it also reminded me of the line we had crossed. The future for Barbara, Richard, and Tom was now bound by this hidden truth. Would it remain buried, or would it resurface? I'm known as Amanda, and at the age of 61, life has presented me with more unexpected challenges than I'd like to admit. I've shared over 3 decades of marriage with my spouse, Jack, once a vibrant man with aspirations of running his own enterprise. Jack has seen those ambitions fade, lost in the grip of inexpensive liquor. Our dwelling, once a haven of comfort and joy, now resonates with the quiet of unexpressed bitterness and the sound of clinking glass. Each day begins with the same pattern: the noise of Jack's labored breathing, the scent of old alcohol, and the view of discarded bottles strewn about like abandoned vows. Our financial state has been bleak for years, with liabilities accumulating like the empty containers in our recycling. We've been surviving from one paycheck to the next, with Jack's sporadic jobs barely reducing our debts. Jack's companions, Tom and Larry, have been part of our lives since before our wedding. They've witnessed our highs and lows, often intervening when Jack's drinking became excessive. However, their assistance always came with an unspoken expectation of returned favors. One evening, as daylight waned, casting elongated shadows across our living space, Tom and Larry visited. The air was filled with a palpable tension, the kind that signals an impending storm. They took their seats, their expressions unusually grave, and that's when they suggested something that caused my heart to flutter. But what they proposed next was something I could never have foreseen. The day commenced like any other, with Jack unconscious on the sofa, the television broadcasting some commercial. I was in the kitchen sipping coffee when Tom and Larry entered. They had a certain look, one that indicated they had a scheme, but this time their gaze was more piercing. "Amanda," Tom began, speaking softly, "we've been considering your predicament with Jack, and we have a suggestion." Larry agreed, adding, "We're aware of your financial struggles. We can assist, but we require something from you in exchange." A shiver ran through me, not from the temperature, but from the gravity of their words. Their suggestion was something I never imagined I'd contemplate. They wanted my involvement in an act that would erase our debts, something that would necessitate crossing a boundary I had never even neared. It was an offer that turned my stomach, a favor that was anything but innocent or straightforward. The room appeared to shrink around me as I grasped the seriousness of their proposal. My thoughts raced with the consequences, the ethical quandaries, and the possible outcomes. What they requested next was something I never thought I'd consider, something that would test the core of my self-perception. The offer was presented clearly on our kitchen table, as evident as the morning light seeping through the window coverings. "We'll settle your $15,000 debt," Tom stated, his tone firm. "But we want you, Amanda, for one evening." The room seemed to spin. My pulse quickened with a blend of dread, revulsion, and a desperate glimmer of hope. Here was an escape, a lifeline offered in the most surprising manner. I glanced at Jack, his snoring a constant echo of our situation. "I need time to ponder," I managed to utter, my voice barely audible. Larry moved closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Decide quickly, Amanda. This proposal won't remain open." The atmosphere was dense with tension, the kind that could overwhelm you if you allowed it. I felt as though I was on the verge of a cliff, the foundation beneath me disintegrating. The notion of their request made me shudder. Yet the burden of our debts, the relentless struggle, the ceaseless cycle of despair, all weighed heavily on me, compelling me to consider the unimaginable. I rose, my legs unsteady, and moved to the window, needing space to inhale, to reflect. Outside, the world appeared to continue, indifferent to the chaos within our home. The garden, once my source of pride, now wild and untended, reflected the condition of our existence. Turning to face Tom and Larry again, I noticed the eagerness in their eyes, not just for me, but for the control they exerted over us. It was a harsh irony that the very individuals who had observed our decline would now present deliverance at such an expense. "I need time," I repeated, this time with more determination. "I need to comprehend what this signifies for me, for us." Tom's expression became stern. Time is not something we have in excess, Amanda. Recall, this is a singular offer. We're not here to engage in games. Larry's grin was disconcerting. We're extending a courtesy. Truly consider it as a trade of services. You provide us with what we desire, and we'll supply you with what you require. The day progressed with the heaviness of their proposal looming over me like a shadow. Jack awoke, unaware of the tempest gathering in our kitchen. He muttered something about requiring a beverage, and I observed him, my heart laden with the choice I was about to make. His eyes were still hazy with slumber, oblivious to the upheaval that had taken hold in our home. As darkness descended, Tom and Larry reappeared, their faces resolute. They entered with the assurance of those who knew they held all the leverage. "Have you reached a decision?" Tom inquired, his gaze probing mine for a response. The kitchen illumination cast extended shadows, making the space feel confined, more stifling. I nodded gradually, the word affirmative slipping from my lips like a deserter. It seemed as though I was relinquishing a fragment of my essence, bartering it for a transient feeling of safety. Jack was already in slumber, his snores a backdrop to the agreement I was about to finalize. Being so near, yet feeling so far away, what did his presence remind me of? I was doing this for Tom, whose face lit up with a smile. But it was Larry's gaze that revealed the truth. There was a craving in his eyes, a predatory spark that turned my stomach. "Good," Larry remarked, his tone smooth and almost calming. "We'll make the arrangements then." The room appeared to sway as they talked about the details, their voices a quiet hum that seemed like a secret plot. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own home, watching as my life was traded away. The consequences of my agreement started to become clear. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about self-respect, about the core of my identity. As they left, promising to come back the next evening, I felt a cold clutch of fear. What would happen when night fell? The idea of being alone with them, of crossing that boundary, made my skin crawl. But the alternative was a life of endless hardship, of watching Jack drink away the little we had left. I moved through the house, each step heavy with the burden of my decision. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by Jack's snoring. I looked at him. The kitchen was dimly lit, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator. Tom and Larry stood close, their presence overpowering. I felt like a lamb led to slaughter, yet there was a part of me that felt freed by the choice. It started with a touch, a hand on my shoulder, then another on my waist. The room felt smaller, the air heavier with each passing moment. My mind was a storm of guilt, fear, and a strange sense of strength. Their hands were firm, their intentions clear, yet there was an unexpected gentleness in their approach, as if they were trying to convince themselves as much as me. As they moved closer, I closed my eyes, letting the moment take over. The reality of what was happening sank in with every heartbeat. Their breaths were hot against my skin, their whispers a mix of reassurance and desire. I could feel the weight of their bodies, the heat radiating from them, pulling me into a world where my choices seemed both inevitable and surreal. Tom's hand slid down my back, his touch sending shivers through me. Larry's fingers traced the outline of my face, his touch almost tender, a stark contrast to the predatory gleam in his eyes earlier. The room spun, not just from the physical closeness, but from the emotional turmoil within me. I was caught in a dance of shadows where every step was laden with implications. Their hands explored, their movements deliberate, as if they were trying to memorize every curve and line of my body. I felt the fabric of my clothes shift under their touch, a silent agreement to the unspoken terms of our deal. The air was thick with the scent of their cologne, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee from earlier. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of what I was doing, of what I had agreed to. The room seemed to close in around us, the walls echoing with the soft sounds of our breathing, the occasional rustle of clothing, the quiet murmurs of consent and anticipation. As the night deepened, the line between what was right and what was necessary blurred. I was no longer just Amanda, the wife of a man lost to his vices. I was a woman making a choice. Morning light crept through the curtains, revealing the aftermath of the night. Jack was still asleep, unaware of the betrayal under his own roof. I felt hollow, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. Tom and Larry had left quietly, their part of the deal fulfilled. The money was in an envelope on the table, a stark reminder of the price of our freedom. I could still feel their touch, the way their hands had roamed, the heat of their breath against my skin. It was a night that would forever be etched in my memory. A night where I had given in to the darkness, to the desperation that had consumed our lives. I looked at Jack, wondering if he'd ever know, if he'd care. The debt was gone, but at what cost? My reflection in the kitchen window showed a woman I barely recognized, one who had made a choice out of desperation, out of love, or perhaps out of a need to feel something other than the numbness of our life. The woman staring back at me seemed older, her eyes heavy with the burden of what she had done. The room was silent, except for Jack's soft snoring, a sound that once brought comfort, but now felt like a mockery. I picked up the envelope, the paper crisp and cold against my fingers. It was supposed to be our salvation, yet it felt like a chain, binding me to a moment I wished I could erase. I walked over to the window, pulling back the curtain to let more light in. The garden, once vibrant, now looked as neglected as our marriage. I wondered if this money could bring back the life we once had, or if it was just a bandage on a wound too deep to heal. Would Jack notice the change in me? Would he sense the shift in our reality? Or would he continue in his oblivious haze, alcohol his only companion? The thought of him finding out, of the disgust and betrayal he might feel, twisted my insides. Yet there was also a part of me that hoped he would wake up, see the envelope, and understand the depth of our despair, the lengths to which I had gone. I turned back to the room,